Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We hope you're enjoying your Memorial Day weekend, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. We're continuing our Campaign 2018 coverage this morning, and the Democratic nominee for Congress in Central Kentucky is here. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, here fresh off her primary victory. McGrath defeated far more politically experienced candidates, including Lexington Mayor Jim Gray, to claim the nomination. It's been a whirlwind since, as national Democrats have pledged strategic support. McGrath's campaign is working very quickly to set up its effort to try to defeat Republican incumbent Andy Barr, who is seeking his fourth term in Washington. Barr is well financed, is an aggressive campaigner, and McGrath's team knows it won't be easy. They also are hoping that national trends will provide some wind at their backs. Democratic congressional nominee Amy McGrath is here. Congratulations, and thanks for coming.
It's great to be
here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning, and I think that we did not do this when we were talking in the campaign, but how you decided to get in this race in the first place.
Sure. I think, like a lot of Americans, after the elections of 2016, I just took a step back and said, I don't accept this, and what can I do? And I was in a unique position of finishing up 20 years in military service, and I decided I want to go home and I want to make a difference, and that's ultimately why I decided to run.
I mean, was it some time in your military career that you decided maybe public service is something you would like to continue in a different way?
My entire adult life has been about service. You know, you serve in the military, that's public service too. So for me, this was just an extension of my service in just a different way. So it really fits who I am.
What was that primary campaign like for you? I mean, we go all the way back to, you start with this video that, as we say, went viral, and you got campaign contributions from around the country as a result of that. But that was filmed somewhere. You said you really never had any experience of talking to a camera and doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What was that? Was the campaign like?
Well, you know, with any new experience, you tackle it. You know, everything's a challenge, and you just look at it as, hey, this is a new experience. I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but if I believe in what I'm doing, I'm going to continue on. You know, the primary, what I learned was that people were really hungry for new leaders. They're hungry for people who don't necessarily grow up within their political party. They want people who are honest. They want people who will build a team. They want people who will listen, and have moral courage to stand up for the things they believe in. And so, you know, that's what the primary campaign showed me.
So you were on your way. You were sort of the early candidate in the race, and then a very experienced political candidate jumped in Lexington Mayor Jim Gray. Did you think you could beat him from the beginning?
I did. And I did because I really felt like my message was resonating to the people who I spoke to. And it was just a matter of getting that message out. But you know, what we found in this primary is that voters also really like Jim Gray. He's been an amazing mayor. They like Reggie Thomas. He's been a great public servant in the state Senate. And what we found was that folks were just hungry for a new generation of leaders, and they didn't necessarily want the status quo. They wanted something different in this cycle. You know, Bill, look at the Kentucky House Republican primary, where we had a leader in the Kentucky House get ousted by a teacher. I mean, this is the cycle that we're in. Folks just want something different. They see things are broken. The
Republicans have welcomed you to the race with criticism, calling you too liberal for the district. They said you were too liberal for the National Democratic Party. They also have noted that you recently moved to the district. Now, there was a carpetbagger ad that came late in the primary campaign from the Gray camp. It got lots of criticism. Do you expect more attempts at that?
Well, you know, I expect the Republicans to attack. That's sort of what they do. And this is the problem with politics. Frankly, this is another reason why I'm running. It's a big experiment of mine. You know, can you be somebody who just focuses on the issues, who just focuses on values, and not, it's really what turns people off to politics. It's really why people don't want to run. They're so tired of the attacks and the labeling of one person as this or that. You know, me being ultra liberal, I mean, I was a Marine for 20 years. You know, I was involved in the military in a very conservative culture. My husband's a Republican. I mean, that's America. We just have people from all walks of life, and we don't necessarily fit into a box.
You have heard from the National Democrats very quickly. The Congressional Campaign Committee put you in its red to blue effort to provide strategic help. Does that mean it's a high priority race for them? Are they making that clear to you?
Well, I think their goal is to defeat Andy Barr, and that's my goal too. But you know what? I don't owe anybody anything. The National Democratic Party did recruit Jim Gray to get in this race against me, and I defeated him. And so, you know, I feel like I don't owe anyone anything. I feel that this is perfect for this district because, you know, we really need an independent voice. This is a purple district. You know, it's a swing district. It's one where you have to have a representative that can represent, you know, the progressives in Lexington, but also, you know, many of the folks out in the rural counties who are more conservative. And so, you know, I think that having that independent voice is going to be really important for me going forward, and that's what I want to do. You
said you don't like attacks in campaigns, but let's use your military lexicon just for a moment. Will you unilaterally disarm and not make attacks if you're attacked?
No, because here's the thing. If Andy Barr attacks me, you know, I'm a Marine and I can take it. And I am going to run a substantive campaign just telling the voters, hey, look at what he's done. You know, the good news is I can just talk about what he's done. You know, he's gone, he's had enthusiastically wanting to take health care away from Kentuckians, 250,000 of them, backing a massive transfer of wealth from the wealthiest 1% and corporations, you know, against the middle class, the working class of America. These are things that I think are hurting us, and that's what I'm going to be talking about.
So you don't consider it an attack when you criticize his record, is it?
No, I don't, because these are the things that he's done.
Jim Gray gave you a full-throated endorsement on primary night when he made his concession. He apparently said some things to you on the phone. Have you been in contact with him? Do you anticipate that he will assist in your campaign now?
Well, I was in contact with him the night of the election, and I do believe that he will be part of this campaign going forward. He said he would. And so I look forward to that. He's been a great mayor. He's very popular, and I could learn a lot from him.
You noted that you carried every county but Fayette, which is the largest, roughly 40% of the vote in the district. How much of your strategy now will revolve around trying to do better in the big city?
Well, you know, my strategy is going to remain the same. We had a scrappy campaign from the beginning. My strategy was about going out and talking to people and listening to people, not writing off any voter or any county. I don't want to be a representative of just one county or even the county that I live in. It's really about all the counties. So we're going to do what we've been doing.
It could be noted that you carried counties in this primary that were carried by Donald Trump in 2016 and by Andy Barr in his re-election in 2016. Do you think that means it will be tougher in the fall to carry those areas that you were able to come through in the Democratic primary?
Not necessarily. I think I just have a lot of work to do. You know, I don't take anything for granted. And I'm going to get out there and keep my message strong and, you know, want to listen to everybody. Part of what I want to do is listen to everybody, not just the people who agree with me. You know, we need real leaders who will go and listen, and you know, that's sort of what I'm going to do.
You made teachers of the note of the teachers' involvement in the election, even in this conversation. There have been other hints that your campaign will try to fold in some in-state issues into this campaign for a federal office. Will you attempt to galvanize anger about state pensions and some of the angst some may be feeling toward Frankfort in your attempt to win a
Well, I'm going to talk
Washington?
about the issues that people really care about. I mean, that's what this is all about. This isn't about Amy's issues. This is about the issues of the people of the 6th District. And this is, you know, definitely the teachers and education in America, and education in Kentucky in particular. That's a big issue right now.
When you are out there, what are people saying to you they want to talk about? And granted, some voters may or may not realize exactly what federal, state, and local issues may be different.
The single most important issue still, and it has been the entire time that I've been running, is health care. In all 19 counties, people are still very concerned about health care. They're very concerned about their premiums rising. They're very concerned about health care being thrown away, especially those with pre-existing conditions. So, you know, they want to know, hey, what's your plan?
All right, let me pick up on that. Let me come back and we'll talk about that and some other issues that you'll be facing in the fall campaign. We are back with Amy McGrath, who is the Democratic nominee for Congress in Central Kentucky, in just a moment on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We are continuing to visit with the Democratic nominee for Congress in Central Kentucky, retired Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, and the Republican will be with us, the incumbent Congressman Andy Barr, on next week's edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. Do you anticipate debates with Congressman Barr?
I hope so.
He indicated in his talk election night that he looks forward to debates. So
okay, great.
I anticipate there will be some. Do you?
I'm all ready for it.
Do you have any kind of ground rules or number in mind or something that you're issuing?
I don't have any ground rules at this point. I mean, I welcome that. This is America. This is what we need. I mean, if it's on the issues and substantive, I'm all about that.
Let's talk about health care. You mentioned that. You said that's the single thing that people bring up to you most often when you're out talking. What do the voters that you've talked to tend to want you to do, and does that jive with what you intend to do?
I think voters are, in general, they're very concerned. They don't necessarily have a how do you fix this kind of thing, although some do. Some will come and say, hey, I think you ought to look at this and that. What I do is I try to tell them how I think it can be fixed, how I think we can move forward in what direction. That's why I talk about the public option a lot. That's why I talk about a Medicare buy-in plan a lot. And so, you know, when I discuss those with voters and I explain to them what it is, the heads will really start nodding. You know, people are like, oh, that makes sense, you know. So that's how I approach it.
And what you would like to see, as one of 435 up there who would have each coming with his or her own ideas, what you would like to see is?
Well, let's talk about a public option. And yes, I'm one of 435, but this is something that you know, 80% of Americans, when they're told about it, really like it. And so I think it's politically feasible. It's simply the ability for under the Obama or the Affordable Care Act exchanges for you to have another option, and that being Uncle Sam. You know, right now you have a choice of 1 or 2 or 3 medical insurance providers, all at the private level. You know, Aetna, United, Blue Cross. I propose you have Uncle Sam as an option. That would give people more choice. You know, Kentuckians love choice. We need it. It would provide more competition.
As their insurance carrier, would they still be able to have options as to the doctors they see? Or
well, if so, yes. I mean, if you choose, you like private insurance, you like your private insurer, you pick your private insurer. If you are not afraid of government insurance, you can pick government insurance.
Are you talking about putting doctors on the federal payroll?
No, not necessarily. It's so what I'm under right now is I have TRICARE. I'm a military retiree. And that's an insurance. And so, you know, that's more of a public type of insurance. And you know, I just think that it would provide more competition. The private insurers would now have to bring their prices down because they're now competing with Uncle Sam. And if you are, you're more trusting of the government, as am I. I've been in military medicine for 24 years, and it was great for my family and I. I would have no problem choosing Uncle Sam. But if you're, you know, less trusting of the government, then you continue to, or you currently like your private insurer, then you choose, your private insurer.
The Bluegrass Army Depot has been an issue for members of Congress from the 6th District for many years. It's located in Madison County. There is nerve agents stored there. If some of that ever got out in a substantial amount, it could be disastrous for many in the area. Is that something that is on your radar screen?
Absolutely. Excuse me, absolutely. We're in the destruction process of our chemical weapons. We've been in it for 20 years since President Clinton signed the Chemical Weapons Convention Treaty. And that is the right thing to do, to destroy those. And it takes time to do it effectively in an environmentally friendly way. So yes, I'm tracking that.
President Trump has canceled a scheduled summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, which had been set for next month. What is your reaction?
Well, it's probably a good thing. My concern was that President Trump was going to have a summit with Kim Jong-un without any strategy, without really understanding the history of North Korea. And so I hope that we move in the right direction, but I don't even know if this summit was probably just a tweet to begin with, frankly.
Congress is dealing with the repeal of the Dodd-Frank Act right now, which addressed the loose lending practices that led up to the recession in 2008. Congressman Barr has said that this has kept local banks from being able to lend money. Regulations gum up loans for people trying to buy a home or vehicles. Critics say it's a giveaway to banks and is risky. Your thought?
Well, I think we ought to look at legislation that helps the local banks. But I'm very concerned that Congressman Barr is not doing that, but he's basically helping the big banks in this legislation. And I'm very concerned that, we can't go back to the days of loose regulations that led us to the crash. We just can't do it in this country. It's not a responsible thing to do. So I'm concerned.
Do you support his efforts at the Camp Nelson National Cemetery to try to
Sure. I think that's prudent.
Its federal presence.
Absolutely.
And as a veteran, a final question on this Memorial Day weekend, does it have extra meaning to you?
Absolutely, Bill. I mean, I've lost friends in combat, and every Memorial Day I take a step back and remember them and remember this country and what they died for. So yeah, it's important for me.
You decided not to actively campaign on this weekend?
No, I'm definitely not going to be doing anything like that.
Appreciate you coming in.
You bet.
And we'll see you along the way in the weeks and months ahead.
Thanks, Bill.
And the nominee for the Democrats in the 6th Congressional District, Amy McGrath. Now we'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers in just a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers here on WKYT. Glad you're with us. It was an interesting primary with the congressional race, legislative upsets, and the Lexington mayor's race that narrowed the crowded field of 7 candidates down to 2 who will face off in November. Dr. Stephen Voss is a University of Kentucky professor who specializes in voter behavior, and he's good enough to join us. We're going to analyze a bit. Thanks for coming, Dr. Voss. Appreciate it. The Democratic nominee for Congress is Amy McGrath, a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Marines, a fighter pilot. She defeated Lexington Mayor Jim Gray. What do you see in the way that all happened?
Yeah, it really didn't surprise me. I'd been saying I thought she could win, probably would win for a while, and people were skeptical. But I was seeing among the activists, the people who volunteer for campaigns, a lot of enthusiasm. I live in a fairly Democratic district. The presence of the McGrath campaign there, the door-to-door workers, very heavy. She was holding her own in debates. I mean, obviously not a pro, but the competition was also a little awkward, so she was doing fairly well there, looking like she belonged on that stage with the other candidates. All of those things pointed in her direction, and of course she had the money. You can't mount a serious challenge from the outside without money, but enough money poured in to let her get her message out.
Jim Gray did well in Lexington, as he generally has, did not do well in the outlying counties.
You know, Jim Gray's the mayor here, so in a sense he was an incumbent. He had a relationship with the voters. They know him. They've appreciated his service as mayor, and they rewarded him for that. In the outlying counties, though, he's just running as another candidate, and they were looking at that contest for sure in a fresher way than Lexington voters.
He didn't compete well out in those areas. Yeah.
He lost every one of the counties, and you know, McGrath cleverly ran her campaign in a way to appeal to those voters. She took a fairly liberal platform, but she spoke about guns. She spoke about the culture in the towns and rural areas in a way that sounded respectful, that connected with voters in a way Democrats often struggle to do.
Was it a mistake on the Gray campaign's part to run a late ad that criticized McGrath for not living in the district when she had military groups and others come back and say, well, she was serving her country?
You know, I doubt it. You can't ever say for sure with a race like this where you have limited data, limited polling, but I doubt the negative campaigning hurt. It was a sort of logical, sensible critique. It was something that voters should have been trying to decide how they felt about, you know, her lack of presence here. Ultimately, I don't think it paid off, but it was hardly a low blow.
Republican Andy Barr will be well-financed. He's the incumbent. He has worked to maintain connections around the district, press his constituent services. He's a strong campaigner. How hard-fought will this race be in the fall?
Oh, it's got to be hard-fought. There aren't many swing districts in Congress anymore. Most districts are either clearly Republican, clearly Democratic. This one can be in play. We know that from the past, and I think we see it in the enthusiasm among the Democratic voters in this primary.
Do you anticipate that at least the Democrats are hoping that there is sort of a wave mentality around the country that McGrath could be get some wind at her sails from?
I don't think we need any kind of nationwide wave. All we need is Republicans run the national government, Republicans run the state. Usually voters move away from the party in power and tend to prefer people from the opposition to sort of give a balance across the parties. That's going to help her. The Republicans in Trump and Bevin, you know, have some popularity problems. That will help her in a midterm election like this. If the Democrats are going to take this district, now's the time.
Do both candidates face decisions about surrogates coming in potentially? Barr was with President Trump at the signing of this Dodd-Frank repeal signing that happened late in the week. McGrath has gotten calls from Joe Biden and from others. I mean, do they have to decide who comes in here and does them some good, or are there always risks when you bring people in?
They have to decide, and for both of them it will be a tough decision. In either case, the national parties are pulling them down. The National Republican Party, not terribly popular right now. The National Democratic Party, not a great fit for a lot of the voters in the district. On the other hand, you bring in celebrities, it fires up the activists, it gets the money pouring in. So you're balancing, do I want to link myself to this unpopular national organization and hurt myself with the voters, the ones who will decide the election, or do I want to sacrifice the star power and the fundraising that they can help me bring in?
So it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off.
What do you see in the Kentucky legislative races where there were some important upsets? The House Majority Leader, Jonathan Schell, lost his seat in the State House. He was one who led on the issue of pension reform, and there was a teacher who defeated him. Are we seeing the beginnings of teacher backlash in this election year?
I don't know about the beginnings. This was a low turnout set of primary contests where a group like teachers' unions or teachers and their friends and family really can move the needle. When you move toward a general election with likely somewhat higher turnout, a broader base of voters, the power of a concentrated interest like that tends to decrease.
Do you think that as we go into the fall elections that obviously there's a lot of ground for the Democrats to potentially make up to, say, retake the House? You would say that's a remote possibility?
Well, the numbers are so poor for the Democrats. They've got so many seats they'd have to take. It would be pretty tough. Now, you know, I said the teacher backlash isn't really what's likely to keep driving things, but the voters also, I think, have a sense that maybe we've gone too far in a direction that neglects maybe things like education, or too far in a conservative direction. This is what voters usually do when policy starts moving in a conservative direction. So I do think there's a broader based support for things like education policy that right now would affect the election. It's just not the clout of teachers. It's the clout of the issue, maybe.
One of your specialties is voter behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Do voters have a way of kind of bringing things back to the center ever so often?
They do. I mean, if you, for example, look at the national level, after Trump won and the Republicans were in charge of Congress, people started shifting leftward and toward the Democrats in their policy preferences and their party leanings, even before Trump took office, even before he changed anything, right? And that just makes no sense. Why would all of a sudden people be generating more liberal policy preferences? It's a buyer's remorse that we see from voters regularly after a party takes power. And let me tell you, Bill, there's one reason why that's sensible. That most voters are neither as liberal as the Democrats nor as conservative as the Republicans. And once they know the Republicans are in charge, the best way they can do to sort of move policy back toward more the center where they are is to start putting in some of the other sides, so they have to negotiate, have to compromise.
Interesting. The next mayor's race will come down to one with long service as an elected official on City Council and Vice Mayor, and Linda Gorton, and the former police chief and Commissioner of Public Safety, Ronnie Baston. Gorton got more than 40% of the vote in that campaign. What would Baston have to do to close the gap?
You know, when you talk about name recognition, Linda Gorton had decent name recognition. She's out and about, you know, whether she thought of herself as campaigning for mayor or not. She shows up at, for example, Martin School events at UK all the time, supports them. She's had the name recognition, and that gave her a big advantage. But now that we're down to two, I expect both of them are going to get a lot more exposure. Usually in that sort of situation, voters will redecide. And I don't know that the imbalance between them in the first pass really makes much of a difference once you're talking about two decently funded people in a runoff.
Both of them talk about this being a civil campaign going forward. Do you believe they can be held to that?
I think they can. I mean, even in the congressional primary where so much was at stake, it was a surprisingly civil contest. Voters have a taste for that, and the rancor at the national level may have even added to the sense we'd like to see these campaigns fought out the way adults engage in political discussion.
We don't want to do what they're doing everywhere else.
That's right.
Dr. Voss, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for this edition of WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We certainly hope you make it a good week ahead.